All right, welcome. We're going to call this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Denton County Transportation Authority to order. We do have a quorum. It is 10:01 a.m. Let's see here. First up, we have the invocation. Dan, would you mind?
Sure thing. Bow your heads with me, join me in prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for bringing us all together to do some public good today. Please provide wisdom and guidance on each of us as we make decisions to provide good transportation options for the residents of our county and our area. Please make sure that each one of us comes and goes in safety today, gets home to our families at the end of the day so that we can enjoy good time and fellowship with family. And in your name we pray, amen.
Amen. All right. Y'all would join me in the pledges to our flags. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible. All right. Just wanted to take a brief second to congratulate Board Member Jaworski. Dan has completed another cycle around the sun. And so happy birthday to you, sir. I appreciate you spending some of your time on that auspicious day with us today.
Thank you very much.
We're what, 29?
Yeah, something like that.
Awesome. Paul, do we have any intros?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, we do. We have several new staff members who have joined our team since the last board meeting. So I'll first invite Ms. Sherelle Evans-Jones to the podium to introduce her new team members.
Good morning, Sherelle Evans-Jones, Chief Financial Officer, pleased to be here with you this morning. I have people. First, I would love to introduce you to Ms. Louise Anderson. She is our grant administrator. She holds a BA in interpersonal and public communication. Interpersonal and public communication. Interpersonal and public communication from Purdue University, as well as her MBA from Indiana Tech. Before joining DCTA, she served as grant administrator for the Boys and Girls Club of Collin County. And she will be working. As if I've never done this before. And she will be working with Ms. Jane Polaris, our Senior Manager of Grants and Budget, on that team within our finance organization. So we are so pleased to have you a part of the organization. Welcome to the team, Denise.
Welcome, welcome.
Welcome.
Next up, we have Mr. Josue Galvin. He is our senior accountant. He has a BA in accounting from the University of Laverne in Valencia, California. He has served in accounting roles in the past in terms of being the account specialist for an organization in California called Unify, as well as the city of Louisville as a accountant with that organization as well. We're pleased to have you be a part of our team and welcome.
Welcome.
Next up, this is a fun one. I want to reintroduce someone to you, Ms. Dawn Jones. She is, I think of this as a great example of, and excited to introduce Ms. Dawn Jones as our finance specialist to you, because she has been a part of our operations team, but had a desire to kind of do more things from a financial perspective. And so this is a neat story in that she is getting an opportunity to, and we want our staff members to be able to realize their overall goals and dreams as well. And so we're excited to welcome you to the team as our finance specialist. Welcome, Dawn. I've been busy. Lastly, I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Bertha Zenda. She is our payroll coordinator. She has a host of experience in terms of 14 to 15 years of HR and payroll assisting work. Most recently, before joining DCTA, Bertha served as HR and payroll specialist for a biomedical company. And we are so pleased to have her be a part of our finance team. We are thankful to you as the board for seeing the vision that we talked about during the budgeting process, where we budgeted so many of these different roles. And I'm just excited to bring these team members before you in realization of those goals. So thank you and welcome to our team.
And then Mr. Javier Trilla has a new staff member to announce as well.
Good morning, Chair, Board of Directors, Javier Trilla, Vice President, Innovation and IT. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing you to Mark Gibson. Mark Gibson is our new Enterprise Application Engineer. He brings with him a wealth of knowledge in database administration, enterprise application support, and very conveniently happens to have experience in the ERP platform that we are launching in a few months, known as Tyler. So excited to have Mark on board. He comes to us from the City of Farmers Branch. Hopefully they're not too mad at us at this point, but here we are. Thank you and welcome, Mark.
It happens.
More to follow next month, but that's all for now.
Hey, I love it. I love it. It's great progress. Hopefully we'll see tons more of that and making sure that everybody's moving at full speed. So great stuff.
Last Farmers Branch is not a member city.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, my first response is they could join. I was like, oh, no, wait, no. I mean, they could, but that'd be weird. All right, next up, we have public comment. This agenda item provides an opportunity for citizens to address the DCTA Board of Directors on any agenda items or other matters relating to DCTA. Each speaker will be given a total of 3 minutes to address any items. Anyone wishing to speak shall be courteous and cordial. Speakers making personal, impertinent, profane, or slanderous remarks may be removed from the meeting. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, including stamping of feet, whistles, yells, clapping, and similar demonstrations will not be permitted. Citizens that are not available to participate in person could have emailed prior to this, and that is available at any board meeting. So if you have an interest in letting us know, you can always offer public comment prior to the meeting. Let's see here. We're not permitted, of course, to take any action on this subject raised by a speaker during public comments by Texas state law. However, the Board of Directors may have an item placed on a future agenda for action. We can refer that item to our administration for further study or action, and we can briefly state existing DCTA policy or provide a brief statement of factual information in response to the inquiry. Keisha, do we have any public comment? Yes. All right, moving on. Board, I will entertain a motion regarding the consent agenda.
I move approval.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion, and a second. Board, if you would please vote.
Aye.
I'm used to I'm used to my clicker buttons on the other one. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Consent agenda passes. Regular agenda. Item 1, discuss and consider acceptance of the fiscal year 2023 financial audit. Who do we have given the presentation? Ms. Sherelle Evans-Jones. There we go.
We have them pulled up, our auditors. Okay, good. Keisha's nodding. Yes, there they are. I will just introduce Mr. Keith Szymanski and Ms. Amy Tritar, who are our auditors who conducted the external audit for updates and information, and then we'll be available for any questions that you might have toward the end. Thanks.
Thank you, Sherelle. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you, albeit in a virtual format. Amy and I are happy to be here to discuss the results of the DCTA audit for the fiscal year ending September 30, 2023. And we're happy to say that there are many positive results to share with you. So we jump in. I wanted to recap the audit timeline, which has been nearly an 8-month process thus far, beginning with the planning and information gathering phase late last summer, where we began formally reaching out to DCTA for updates, new information, and items that would be relevant to the upcoming audit. We had a pre-audit communication with the board chair in October and shared our planning letter with the rest of the board shortly after that. We performed risk assessment procedures in that same month, and then formally began audit procedures late November through December and into early January, in which we tested both the financial statement balances as well as the authority's compliance with federal programs as part of our single audit. And that brings us to today, where we're going over the results for the board. Moving on to the next slide, there are three primary deliverables that we are providing today. Number one is the independent auditor's report on the annual comprehensive financial report. We also have our end of audit letter, which is basically a follow-up to the planning letter sent out to the board prior to beginning procedures, and then the single audit report related to compliance with federal programs. We'll add some additional commentary on each of those items as we continue. So on the next slide, starting with the independent auditor's report, it is included in your packet, currently in draft format, just because we are dotting the i's and crossing some t's on some documentation items and cleaning that up. But we do expect over the next 2 to 3 weeks that will be completed, formally processed, and provided to DCTA without any changes compared to the draft that you have before you today. Most importantly, it is an unmodified opinion, which is the highest level of assurance we can give to a set of financial statements, and it lets the readers know that they can rely on the information that follows. With that, I will turn it over to Amy to cover some of the financial highlights for the last fiscal year.
Thanks, Keith. As Keith mentioned, I'll briefly walk you all through a few of the financial highlights that hitting on some of the more significant balances you will see in the statements. So starting off, 2023 was a good year financially with 9.4 million added to net position. Starting with the authority's largest source of revenue, sales tax revenue, this increased almost 4% over the prior year, or 1.5 million. Operating revenue, which is made up of passenger revenue and contract services, increased by 26%, or 1.4 million from prior year, as DCTA is turning back towards pre-COVID levels when looking at passenger revenue. And then grant revenue is another major source of revenue for the authority. However, as the last of the COVID-19 grant funding was recognized in the prior year, total grant revenue for 2023 decreased by about 13 million, or almost 58%. Lastly, operating expenses decreased slightly by about 3%, remaining relatively consistent with last year. Moving to the balance sheet here on the next slide. We're happy to report that DCTA has a strong balance sheet when looking at assets, liabilities, and unrestricted net position. There is 111 million of unrestricted cash and investments, which can be used to pay off current liabilities or other needed expenditures, 19 million of long-term debt, and total net position of 385 million. However, we do provide this breakout of net position here, as it is important to note that 269 million of this is the net investment in capital assets, meaning the amount is no longer available for operations as it is already spent in the form of buses, rail equipment, etc. This leaves 116 million unrestricted, and this amount would be available to fund future operations.
Thanks, Amy. Moving on to the next deliverable, the report to the board. It is broken up into two sections. Section 1 are required communications under the auditing standards. And this largely is boilerplate information because there were no major deviations from our audit plan or other items that we need to bring to the board's attention. Happy to report that there were no disagreements with management, no difficulties encountered in performing the audit, and no misstatements that we identified as part of the audit. In section 2, other recommendations and informational items, the only one that we tailored specifically to DCTA is the first one related to internal controls. So as you're aware, there were a number of vacancies in the finance department over the last year, which forced the CFO and others to do certain tasks that normally other positions would perform during the year. So we evaluated that as a potential internal control concern or deficiency that we might need to bring to the board's attention. We found that there were still appropriate segregation of duties and other internal controls in place, that there were no findings or vulnerabilities to the best of our knowledge. But nevertheless, because of those vacancies, the CFO did have to step down and perform other duties that others normally would, like I said. Fortunately, with all of those, many of those positions or all of the vacancies currently being filled, the finance department can segregate those duties and have the various positions performing those duties that we would typically see. And so that will allow the CFO to operate at a higher level and for all of the prescribed controls, checks and balances to be in place going forward. So again, while there were no specific areas of concern, it was a bit of an unusual circumstance given the number of vacancies during the year and the necessary stepping down of the CFO just to keep things moving and performing the required monthly reconciliations and closings. So we thank her for doing that. I know at the end of the year, the audit was not the most pleasant experience as it is for anyone. It's an invasive process. We ask a lot of questions and require a lot of information, but on top of everything else going on, we appreciate Sherelle's assistance and that of the rest of her team and others at DCTA in helping to get through the audit. Moving on to the next deliverable, the single audit report. It does include 3 separate reports, including an opinion on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards or CFA, internal controls over financial reporting, and compliance with major federal programs. The schedule of expenditures of federal awards does detail out $9.5 million of federal expenditures in the last year. And I'm happy to report that based on both of our testing of the financial statements and the compliance with federal programs, we have no findings to bring to the board's attention. So particularly given the vacancies and the added complexities over the last couple of years with new accounting standards and other items that have been applicable, new compliance requirements for the federal grants. This should be considered very noteworthy that there are no such findings to bring to your attention. And again, we thank the CFO and her staff for their cooperation and the job well done to get to that point. Lastly, to close with just a few comments, we are asked to look at quarterly investment reports as part of the audit. We noted no errors or exceptions in any of those. We will be performing our agreed upon procedures over the National Transportation Database data that's being compiled and filed currently. And once again, we thank Sherelle, the finance department staff, and others throughout the organization that assisted as part of our audit. With that, I'm happy to pause, and if the chair welcomes it, we'd be happy to take any questions that the board may have.
Board, are there any questions? I want to thank you guys for a very succinct and easy to digest report. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Sammy.
Pleasure to serve you.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may just say thank you to Sherelle and Lakeisha and Jane and the entire finance team that, as you saw, most of whom got introduced this morning, to deliver this sort of result in that sort of process of constructing the team is very commendable, and I appreciate all of her and her team's efforts. So thank you for your leadership there, Sherelle.
My pleasure.
All right, so we need to accept that financial audit. I'll entertain a motion.
I'll offer a motion to accept the report. Second that motion.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Next hurdle.
On to new things.
All right, next up, we have approval of the strategic work session meeting minutes dated January. Oh, that's consent. Moving back. Consider authorizing the chief executive officer to enter into a 3-year contract with Cintas through the Omnia Partnership Co-op beginning April 1, 2024 for uniform services and supplies for North Texas Mobility Corporation in the amount of $271,294. Mr. Bell,
Good morning.
take it away.
Well, welcome, and thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Get the opportunity to talk to you about something that is near and dear to my heart, and that's the look of our employees on the front line. And that first look is obviously we are recommending that the board authorize the chief executive officer to enter into a 3-year agreement with Cintas through Omni Partnership Co-op beginning April 1st for uniforms and supplies for North Texas Mobility Corporation in the amount of $271,294. Back in 2022, we went into an agreement with UniFirst. That agreement was broken up into 4 different parts, 3 of which are combined into one. The review of this contract, the review of this situation was a little bit complex. but the need to dive into it based on some challenges we ran into with the current supplier, we felt the need of being able to refresh our look and revamp how we do these contracts to simplify things for the future. The first one was in the UniFirst bus operator uniforms. That one basically ran into some challenges based on the quality of look of the uniforms, as you well know, and of course, the durability of these uniforms. The employees were looking for an opportunity to be refreshed in this area. And then the other three were the uniforms for the maintenance department, as well as the service attendants, and then supplies through UniFirst when we're looking at toiletry, things of those nature. And then, of course, Infinity Supplies, which is a subsidiary in providing other supplies that UniFirst could not. Those three were grouped into one contract, and unfortunately, that contract term had lapsed, and we were on a month-to-month. And so this opened up the opportunity to review how we can simplify this from a financial standpoint, as well as improve the uniforms and conditions overall. And in that enhancement, we're also taking a look at one, of course, as you can see here from the dummies. I'm not going to call it a dummy. I should rephrase that. Just the mannequins that we have out here, that the operators actually went through the process of voting on how they wanted to look and the quality of the uniforms. If you ever get a chance, please go out there and touch the fabric on these navy blue uniforms. It's a lot more breathable, more presentable. But the biggest feature is this: is our uniforms for the operators, as well as the mechanics and service attendants, are going to be laundered. So now we're going to be making sure that these uniforms are in good condition all year round, and we're not dealing with older uniforms needing to be transitioned out, that the uniform supplier will provide that piece. The other piece, again, is going back to the simplification of one contract and being able to pay for this overall rather than broken up into two separate parts. And so when you look at the breakdown of the vendor situation, UniFirst was for the operators, maintenance, and of course, the supplies. And that contract is continuing, of course, through October to March of this year. And you can see, I'll focus your attention on the top half here. This is the vendors when you're looking at this for 2024. And then, of course, Cintas uniforms and operators for all of the staff. We're actually adding in uniforms for supervisors, as well as, of course, our maintenance crew. In addition to that. So there's going to be more uniforms being provided in this contract than in the previous one. With that, once you start to look at the breakdown into the new uniform provider, it becomes very simple. However, the big piece here that I'll focus your attention up here, our current budget is at $99,000 for the year. And with this transition and a blending of the two contracts for the remainder of this year, we are going to be seeing a savings overall. But once you get into the vendor going in future years, it will have a little bit of an increase because of the additional uniforms that we're going to be providing. Of course, an additional level of service we're going to be receiving as a result of that. So it'll be a nice improvement. So with that, we're still recommending that the approval of this be for the Chief Executive Officer to be allowed to approve and execute this agreement moving forward.
Board, I'll entertain a motion unless there's questions or discussion. If none.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion to approve the agenda item as presented.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Board, if you would please vote.
Aye.
Aye.
If you're in favor, yes, multitask. Good deal. So we have, it sounds like unanimous. Go ahead and book it. Thank you,
All right.
Mr. Bell.
Awesome, thank you. Well, I'm also here for the next agenda.
You are. So next up, we have multiple discussion items. So nothing to vote on today, but definitely plenty to chew on. So we are now going to move into our discussion of the update on our bus fleet replacement and bus purchases.
Well, this one is definitely a blessing to come after the audit because this involves a lot more money over the course of several years. So if you recall, last year, I came to you with a look at our current fleet and the idea to be able to provide to you a plan for replacing that fleet. This presentation will go over the details of that through the course of this discussion. This plan itself covers areas from the transit asset management plan to the fleet management overview, bus fleet overview, bus purchase options, hybrid diesels, talk more about that in detail, and of course, the low-no emissions plan and the long-range service plan, the LRSP. When you look at the transition or the TAMS plan, we like to call it, that is the Transit Asset Management Plan that was created originally back in 2020. We basically came to the decision, through, of course, you as the board, agreed that the base term for our useful life benchmarks would be based on the age and not the miles of the vehicle. And if I draw your attention to the top portion of this slide, we're looking at the age of the vehicles for our large heavy-duty buses at 12 years to our small heavy-duty buses, which are 30-footers, UNT service, at 10 years, and our mid-duty cutaway buses, which are our access vehicles, at 5 years. Right now, if I draw your attention to the middle of this slide, right now, our large fleet buses, fixed route buses, we are currently at 54% beyond their useful life. So that means these vehicles, of course, served us very well, but based on our TAM plan, we're in a position where we want to transition away from these vehicles and retire them. Now, I'm also going to draw your attention to the areas that are circled in
Can I
green.
ask a quick question? What is a useful life of one of?
The useful life for our vehicles is 12 years for these larger vehicles as identified. That is the ULB section right here.
Okay,
Okay,
so.
and that is per FTA. That's an FTA
That's an
requirement.
FTA requirement.
Yes.
They could go further.
They
obviously.
can go further, and as you'll see later on in the presentation where we have extended these vehicles further as well.
Okay, thank you.
Now, the other parameter that they use from FTA is based on mileage, but it was agreed within the TAM plan that we would focus our attention on age versus mileage. So if I'll draw your attention again to the green area, this is a unique situation. Those green buses there, 6 of them, are Eldorados. And earlier this year, Eldorado announced that they were going out of business. So we are definitely in a position to want to exercise the retirement of these vehicles, as over the next 10 years, parts may start to become more and more expensive to procure. And so we want to exercise the opportunity to retire those vehicles in the near future. But the areas in red that I've highlighted for you, those vehicles are coming up or have already exceeded their useful life, and we want to focus our attention on addressing those based on the TAM requirements. Now, the development of the bus fleet maintenance management plan is an ongoing effort, and it's going to enhance the utilization and the information from the TAM plan. We talked about, of course, the years for utilizing these vehicles, from 5 for the R-Box and 26-footers to 12 years for the fixed route vehicles. But we're also looking at the spare ratio. FTA does suggest that we utilize a 20% spare ratio, and so we want to take a look at how that works within our plan. We also looking at the development of the fleet maintenance plan for low to no emission vehicles. As we all know, that is a focus point within the industry to start to reduce greenhouse gas and our carbon footprint. And then the next, of course, is taking a look at other technologies as well that we can utilize to benefit our operators as well as our customers as a whole. Now, this is the detailed one that I shared with you last year, and I want to draw your attention to the bottom half of the screen for the information here. Now, ULB I referred to in the previous slide of the useful life benchmark. The RT references retired buses, and the ES is the extended service. And I'll explain a little bit more there. The extended service is something we identify in the audit of the vehicles and the condition of the vehicles, that they are in good operating service mode, and they can be used beyond their useful life. That means that we have the ability of maintaining them and pushing them beyond those 12 years. And so that's what we've identified here as the ES for extended service. The RP2 is a repower engine transmission rebuild, and we do that on a regular basis. And as you'll see here, with the focus at FY24, we actually retired 1 bus, we extended 4, and we did 4 repowers for the engines and transmissions during the course of this year. And as I bring your attention down here, we started the year with 28 vehicles. We plan on finishing the year with 27. Now, this is where it gets a little complicated, so please follow me. If you ask me to repeat, I will. I don't want to lose you here. But in FY25, we are going to have those 4 that were extended service. We're going to retire 2 more in FY25, but we're going to extend the remaining 2 out of those 4 into 26. And at which point we'll have another 5 vehicles receiving extended service. So now, bringing that back down, to 27, we will have an extended service of 7, and we will retire 2 more for this coming year.
Okay.
As we go into 26, we are going to retire the remaining 2 out of the original 4 in this line, and we are going to extend service for 5. That brings us down to we're also planning on receiving in FY 26 an additional 4 vehicles. Now, the purpose of addressing this to you is right here. The retired vehicles here from FY 24 to FY 30 is going to be roughly 28 vehicles during that period of time. The new vehicle purchases that we plan to receive during the course of those fiscal years will be a total of 24. That brings us to an operating vehicle fleet after FY 27 to 24 vehicles, and that keeps us at the spare ratio that we need in order to provide the service that we currently are operating. This is based on current operational needs. This is not based on growth or anything of that nature. So I want to make sure that I stress that this is current.
I've got a few questions. Number one, like in my city life, when we talk about replacing big vehicles like fire engines, right now we're having to plan literally years in advance because of how long it's taking to get them built and shipped and all that kind of stuff because of supply chain and whatever else. Are you dealing with the same challenge with these?
Yes. Now, the industry norm for fixed route buses is anywhere from 16 to 18 months from your request to purchase to when they are received. And so we're trying to plan for that.
So you built that
Right now,
into what you're
yes.
showing here. Second, you kind of answered this in terms of your spare program, but I know that we're having conversations about changing up Go Zone and Denton and adding bus service in lieu of, trying to get more people on buses. Is that accounted for in this as well, or is that something that we'll have to readdress later?
Actually, within these 4 here, we're looking to, some of the buses that we're looking to retire are 35 footers, and we're looking to procure 40 footers by the end of this year in order to be able to have more capacity for some of the larger routes that we have, but without having to add more vehicles.
Okay. That was all I had for now.
What we don't know, and all that is accurate, what we don't know is what the new if the new schedules will trip the need for additional actual individual vehicles. And that's where he said, we do not bake that into this
Yeah.
yet. So this is the baseline that we built from.
So for the sake of this discussion, our focus has been strictly on the fixed route vehicles here. On the following lines, these are our cutaway vehicles. And as you can see, it says FR for fixed route because we do utilize 8 of our vehicles on some of our fixed routes for the cutaways. Those are the smaller access vehicles. These are in fairly good condition, and we have already estimated that we can stretch those out to FY 27. So why do that? We want to bring all of our purchases in line and start to have a regular pattern for the years to come on the purchasing of our vehicles. We want to do a real good job of maintaining these vehicles, and our maintenance staff is actually showing that already. So we believe that we can extend these out to 27 and start to get into a regular cadence of every 10 years and planning for the future. So all of this is the first step towards seeing that become a reality.
Mr. Mill, I have a question on the underlying technology of the vehicles. Do they have some of the advanced telemetry that I've been seeing on semi trucks and those types of things where they start to predictively tell you, hey, you need this thing in for an oil change. You've got a cylinder that's running weak. Is that capacity on these vehicles today?
On the newer vehicles, yes. These older ones, no. Now,
Okay.
do we have the ability of adding technologies in order to be able to enhance that? Yes, we do, but we want to do that within the procurement of newer vehicles.
Right.
It's a lot easier.
Yeah, why
And
retrofit?
it just makes a smoother transition.
Okay, yeah, so we stay more in that preventative mode
Exactly.
for maintenance as opposed to rip and replace. Okay.
Exactly. All right, any other questions regarding this slide?
more.
Yes.
This winter was a bad winter on electric cars and so on and so forth. I was wondering if any of that has affected what you did for the future, or have you changed your plan as to the number of electric vehicles versus petroleum or whatever?
There is definitely a thought. If I can be honest, as an electric car owner, I'm not happy about the performance that my car gave, but that doesn't mean buses in the future won't. But I will say this, that electric bus purchasing for us right now is not in the immediate future.
Okay.
And it's something we believe the technology still needs some improvements. And so we're going to continue evaluating that as we go further out into the 20-year plan of vehicles.
Thank you.
So as you replace, where do the old ones go? What do we do
go
with
through a
those?
process of auctioning them off, and we are required per FTA to do that. Once they've reached their useful life, that we have to go through an auctioning process to have them removed. And our procurement department has done an outstanding job being able to make sure that these vehicles and some of our outdated equipment and parts and supplies are being able to be auctioned off, so we're not taking up valuable shelf space. So next slide. This is our purchase options. Now, we've identified the items in green because those are immediate needs. The one in red, as you see, CNG, electric, that requires a much longer runway to be able to perform and produce this accurately. But our focus right now are the diesels and potentially hybrid diesels, as well as for the cutaways, gasoline unleaded. There is a very specific market for the low floor cutaways. And right now, these are the best options that we have at this point. And so we're taking a look at those to continue providing the services that we have. They're fairly decent vehicle. We would love to have something a little bit more flexible, but at the same time, this is providing the service that we need. Now, going on to the actual details and purchases and information. This is a lengthy one, and this requires a lot more review and preparation. The operator workstation is the one that's near and dear to my heart, being a former operator. And we've actually gone through the approach of recruiting operators to be part of a committee, to tell us exactly what they're looking for in their workstation. Now, it's not just the seat. It also happens to be secure your barrier doors, which is in the picture there. Let me get that highlight in this picture here. That provides obviously the level of security and other means. But we want to make sure that they have some input into how this area in their driving compartment is designed. I've had the pleasure of working some other places where we've actually done that, and it's produced great dividends to us and having them part of that process. The other one is technology enhancements to customer service information and electronic fare payment. Last year, I kind of shared this diagram here. There's a multitude of things that we've already started, which of course, as you notice, the APCs and Swiftly integration, that was one, but security cameras, that's another. These are all separate pieces that we have to identify through this purchasing process that helps aid towards the customization of our buses. And as we talk about customization, we're looking at that from branding to accessibility features, as well as individual design elements. Right now, there's over 100 different items when we're working with a manufacturer. It's just like going and picking up your new vehicle from a dealership. You've got to go through and make the selections that best fit the needs for who you are and the services you provide. And so we're going to be breaking this down in future discussions where the base vehicle cost right now for a fixed route bus, that's a 35 to 40 footer, is $527,000 to $533,000. It can run as high as $70,000 in the additional options. And in future presentations, you will see that we'll break down all of the different elements associated with that customization process. So with that, we're going to get into the low-no emissions plan. And that is something that is really starting to, I shouldn't say start, it's been ongoing for quite some time, but we have the opportunity of being able to dive into this. Going green is definitely the right thing to do in our industry. It helps with the environment, it helps for the employees. And so we are having to work with a firm to help draft the necessary low-no emissions plan in order to be able to obtain the grants and funding necessary to support the purchases of these type of vehicles in the future. Now with this, go into the hybrid diesel concept. Hybrid diesel, again, back in 2005, the FTA along with the DOT created a challenge for most transit agencies called Sustainable Transit for a Healthy Planet. Back then, their goal was to reduce emissions by over 50 to 52% between 2005 and 2030. Obviously, it wasn't a requirement of every agency, but it's one that other agencies have received a lot of accolades for. And when you start to look at the most economical purchase for an agency of our size, we have started to take a look at hybrid diesel. So why hybrid diesel? One, it meets the elements and requirements of a low-no grant to help provide additional funding to support these purchases. But in addition, when you start to look at the capabilities of this vehicle from a geofence technology aspect, when these vehicles are running in areas such as our DDTC or in UNT, they have the ability of running strictly under electric power. So once they hit that geofence area that we've identified, they'll shift into electric power mode in order to reduce the emissions in that particular area. That is a plus, and that's a plus that we really can take advantage of. Now, there's other areas that you can do that in. Right now, some of these vehicles, once they go below 35 miles an hour, they go strictly to electric. And then once they go above 35, they have the ability of recharging the vehicle as well. Any questions with this slide? All right, and that's it. No questions? All right, thank you very much.
I more a comment than anything. I think as we look to build out these vehicles, we saw the amazing amount of customization that could happen. I think the key as we look through that is we don't have to do everything, but can we find those one or two things that will delight a customer? When they hop on that bus, does it make them feel safe? Does it make them feel like this is cool? I know when I get on the train, I hear more often than not, wow, the bike storage system is really amazing. It's really easy to use. So if we can, as we're going through that customization, really see if we can't find those opportunities to delight our customers, I think that'd be outstanding.
That's where we're going to discuss the next future presentations on passenger amenities and what that will bring. So that's an actual line item.
And I appreciate the focus on if we're looking to grab grant money to help us with the funding. I like the diesel electric option simply because the uplift to get our guys trained to be, they're battery technicians. That's a whole different skill set than working on a diesel engine. And so I can appreciate the cost concerns that come with that kind of a refit all the way through, plus battery's not there. But I would say that as we get further down the road, we probably need to explore CNG as a model. If battery just does not move as fast as it's predicted to move. I find that they're pretty efficient. They do give us a lot of green credit and probably fit in that model as well. So
Excellent.
Something to think about.
All right,
Appreciate it.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for this really detailed explanation. This is something that I've really been looking forward to hearing about for a while. I do want to sort of address, I know that a lot of the folks in Denton who share their concerns with me, sustainability is a really high priority. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions is a really high priority for a lot of Dentonites. And I do want to acknowledge, the first and foremost, the most important thing that we do as an agency to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is increase ridership. That's our primary sustainability related goal is increasing ridership. To the extent that we also want to produce a low and no emission fleet plan. I'm really excited about that as well. Obviously there's grant funding associated with that. And there are certain minimum sort of characteristics that this plan needs to meet in order to qualify for that grant funding. I would love to see us creating an ambitious, but also concrete and realistic plan for adopting lower emission vehicles. And I want to sort of make sure that we're communicating with the public that about how long of a timeline that is, because both because the technology on electric vehicles isn't there, because it would be a huge transition for our staff to learn how to maintain electric vehicles, and also because just the procurement process for even a diesel vehicle is incredibly long. So, this is obviously going to be a part of we discussed part of the long range service plan process, planning for those low and no emission vehicles in out years. So I just wanted to kind of highlight that, call that out to a lot of the folks who I know are listening at home and are probably really concerned about this issue. That, you know, we're all very concerned about sustainability, and that's why we're going to continue focusing on ridership. And we also want to do low and no emission vehicles, but that is a very long timeline.
Can I make a comment? I think that's all, you know, it's great, and I think we should be moving towards that sustainability. I think it is wise that our staff is also kind of looking at it from the maturation of the electrical battery industry. There's still a lot of things we don't know as far as the maintenance, how long it, you know, some of these new technology will actually last. So I think it's, you know, we acknowledge that, and as a board, I would say that we're going in the right direction. But I'm also appreciate it, you know, you're taking the time to understand it, because there's going to be a greater lift on the terms of your technicians. Maybe you have to hire different technicians, or certainly train them in a different way. So I recognize that, and I know for the public, we're trying to move as fast as we can, but we also want to do it in a responsible way. So, thank you.
There are no other comments on this one. Thank you, Mr. Bell. I'm gonna juggle the calendar just a little bit because I know we have some timing constraints. I'd like to go ahead and convene into an executive session. We're gonna pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.072. The Board of Directors will convene into closed executive session to consult with General Counsel regarding collective bargaining agreements between the North Texas Mobility Corporation and Amalgamated Transit Union. And number two, pursuant to Texas Government Code Section 551.074 personnel matters, the Board of Directors will convene in closed session to deliberate the duties and performance of the Chief Executive Officer, fiscal year 2024 mid-year performance evaluation. We're in closed session. Open session, it is, I need a microphone. We are back into open session. It is 12:05 PM. We are going to move on to item 5, which is discuss the update on the A Train Enhancement Program. Oh, no, item 4, we're at the discuss the update of the intermittent service plan. Sorry about that. Thank you, Co-Chair. Because that's what you are at this point. All right, Austin, it's all yours, sir.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the board. Today, we're going to discuss some updates with ISP. To begin, I'd like to just briefly recap our initial strategy that was laid out last fiscal year of how we're working towards a board decision for the first phase of the ISP. Current steps that you see in front of you remain intact, with the team working towards a proposal to present in front of the board in the coming months. I'd like to take a minute to review some of the questions we'd like to present to the board as food for thought. These decisions will be a critical piece as we move forward with the ISP. So you'll see on the bottom right-hand section of the slide, 3 of the questions. First one, do we want to remove the go zone option in the 3, 6, and 7 Connect travel shed? The second question is, would we like to make additional investments in bus frequency? And then the third question is, if we do want to remove that go zone option, what do we do with that capacity that will be available in that offset? So we don't need to make any decisions right now, but those are some questions that we'd like to let y'all chew on for a little bit. As we look back on the overall objectives of phase 1, the work outlined in this presentation is in alignment with phase 1 and the redundant service options within that Connect service. So again, recap, phase 1 is to redirect those go zone trips in that 3, 6, 7 travel shed. So where have we been? We'd like to take a minute to reflect on our past and our current pace for record ridership this year. As you can see, based on our trajectory, we're going to be beyond 3 million this fiscal year. And these overall numbers are driving both challenges and opportunities for this agency to make the right data-driven decisions for our riders and the communities we serve. As you'll see in the upcoming slides, this growth in ridership is having some impact on our KPIs. We see this point in time as a great opportunity to dial in our intermediate service plan by looking at options that allow us the flexibility to respond to this level of growth. Now we start diving into the data sets. And from here on out, you're going to see a lot of charts. So buckle in, it's going to be a data-driven presentation here. So this chart on the left illustrates the Connect ridership from FY19 to 23. The takeaway here is the rate of growth on all 3 routes is significant. The chart on the right is the overall bus ridership share by service. And the key takeaway here is that the UNT share of overall bus continues to grow year over year, and that the vast majority of ridership is happening on the UNT service. You will also see over the past fiscal year, UNT growth coincides with Connect growth, which is a valuable takeaway as we look at our long-range service plan and the network design and planning alignment. When we start to look at ridership, we have to take in consideration efficiency. There's a lot of data on this slide, so I'm going to walk everybody through it as much as I can. When we talk about efficiency on a network, we typically measure that by passengers per hour. Our current KPI for bus ridership efficiency is 5 passengers per hour. And the two charts here show us how different ridership is when we look at it through different lenses of passenger per revenue hour and passengers per network hour. Passengers per revenue hour is defined by the number of passengers on one single bus in 1 hour. While passengers per network hour, we're looking at the number of passengers on all buses throughout the network. And this is key because we need to compare apples to apples when we talk about mode metrics. So the passenger per network hour is the best measurement when we consider ridership and efficiency based on comparing it with other modes like GoZone.
And Austin, just so I have that picture in my head, right? If we were gonna move the equivalent amount of people with Go Zone, we'd basically have a swarm of Go Zone vehicles to handle that. So,
Correct.
so that's why we're kind of adjusted the metric in my head, is to help with that equivalency between the two modalities.
Right, GoZone has a big pool of vehicles, so we want to compare that to our pool of vehicles and.
Right. Thank you.
Now we'll dive into the task at hand with Connect and GoZone service overlap. For FY '23, as you'll see, this data shows that approximately 619,000 GoZone trips were completed in Denton. For our analysis, we took the 3, 6, and 7 routes, offset those by a quarter mile, which you'll see in the light green area, and plotting originating destination trips within that buffer. We found that this was 64,000 trips, about 10% of all Denton GoZone trips were taken within a quarter mile of a Connect bus route. Another lens we've looked at it is schedule data. Excuse me. With this graph, it's showing us that as Connect service decreases, for the most part, GoZone remains constant, especially during the UNT winter and summer breaks. So we could ascertain essentially that there's a solid demand for transit year round on a more consistent basis. And what you'll see here is the black line is the GoZone throughout the year, and the rest of the colors are the Connect service. So as you can see in the winter and summer breaks, even though those services decline, the GoZone data is showing us that that remains constant. When we look at the current canvas of KPIs of GoZone and fixed route, the great news is we're seeing is that we're meeting our KPIs. When we look at the charts at the top left, we see gradual growth in wait times. We also see seat unavailability and balance between Denton and Louisville and Highland Village. These metrics point to a potential supply and demand issue we're currently investigating. Last year, we saw consistent seat unavailability around at or around below 10% for the overall system. This year, it appears that that number has grown a little bit. And we're thinking that could be a direct result of more ridership causing pressure to meet demand. Our operation teams is meeting weekly with GoZone to resolve this, and this will be the basis for realignment of resources on upcoming needs. Any questions on this slide?
I think just more my conversation on this. That's, I don't think, acceptable to having that split, especially when Denton has more service and more service options than the other two cities. So I know that we've got some pressure there. So I'd like to see what we can do. So in my head, there's really two options. One is, of course, what we're going to be talking about, which is how do we reallocate those resources by moving people onto the bus in that quarter mile shed. The other piece of this, though, is if that's not functioning, then we may need to look at diversifying our KPIs between the two. I'd hate to get into that just because it creates a lot more metrics that we have to start messing with, north versus south KPIs, and but this has been a consistent struggle between the two zones, and we've got to get to a point where we've got our heads around it.
Agree.
For what it's worth, I agree as well. Disagree at all.
Especially for the folks that are outside of this group. You know, some of these comments are for the broader entity that we're speaking to today.
Okay, so when we step back for a minute and take a look at our entire bus network, essentially the top 5 UNT routes with Connect, what we want to share with the group here is the opportunity that we have in front of us for a single unified year-round bus network. The exhibit on the left shows GoZone origin destination trips within the quarter mile of the overall top 5 UNT routes and Connect. This equates to approximately 35% of all Denton Go Zone trips are happening within this travel shed. The exhibit on the right shows the yearly schedule demand and solidifies the case that we made on the previous slide that Go Zone demand remains intact and constant during UNT and UNT summer and winter breaks. Takeaway here is the opportunity to have us creating a simple, consistent, unified year-round bus network that leverages living data sets to guide service design. Now let's look at current schedule and frequency opportunities. The top graphic shows our current schedule for the 3, 6, and 7 routes. The bottom blue bars indicate hourly ridership for FY23 on each route. This data helps us understand where the hourly demand resides on both Connect and Go Zone, so we can better align a more consistent schedule with the overall network and other transit connections. For Connect 3 on the far left, we see a strong demand through the 6 p.m. hour, coinciding with the current service ending time. Connect 6 stays strong and curtails towards the 7 and 8 p.m. hours, consistent with that end of service. And Connect 7 is our strongest performer through the 9 to 10 p.m. hour. When we think about the opportunity Go Zone relocation away from Go's Connect route has for us, we also need to ensure alignment of our bus stop implementation plan. Implementation of this plan will allow us to ensure we meet the goal of redirecting Go Zone rides to a fixed route bus stop with a walk distance of no more than a quarter mile from their requested origin pickup location. The bus stop study identified 18 new stops to ensure alignment of capturing these Go Zone rides, and phase 1 of the ISP would have the requirement of implementing these stops to support that Go Zone distribution. We've outlined our current strategy with phase 1 of the bus stop implementation plan. Keynotes here are communication and collaboration with our operators, the city of Denton, and the public on these new locations. Obtaining cost alignment of funding, development of construction schedule, and contract execution will be the sequences that we propose to successfully implement this plan. Now let's look at the overall trip duration comparison from where we are today to where we could be in the future. When we talk about overall transit trip planning, we need to incorporate both wait time and walk time into the equation. This table compares Go Zone overall transit time to the multiple options of fixed route. Purpose of this is to illustrate the overall nature of the Go Zone trip duration, and it's comparable to a fixed route option. The point here is that once we get to a 40-minute frequency and a transfer, the fixed route no longer becomes an attractive or viable solution. Points to note that we use the up to designator as a worst case scenario in these numbers, and that bus schedule optimization could reduce wait times at transfer points. So the key takeaway here is Go Zone, we're seeing up to 60-minute total travel time on average. And then we're seeing the fixed route in a 20-minute, no transfer being less than that, and then fixed route, no transfer on a 40-minute frequency, right in line with that Go Zone option. Let's take a moment to look at how we move from what this looks like from today to the future with regarding to rider experience. Here are some examples of how the Go Zone app would look to the customer. Sorry for the size of that, but it's on a phone. Today, based on your request pickup area, you're given Go Zone option as your first option. In the future, based on criteria set by DCTA, you would only get one option followed by instructions on how to get that to that option. These future proposals could also include transfer warnings and could have expanded map views, as you'll see on the far right, to provide better customer interface with the app. One key note is this app would turn on and off at the start and stop of the bus network. This element, it would be one of the core reasons we want to propose a 20-minute frequency on these connect routes. So as we're moving left to right, this is what you see today. You'll have one option essentially to take Go Zone within your request area. Tomorrow, we would have essentially request the app. If it's within that quarter-mile travel shed, you would have the one option to take the fixed route. Now, if you're outside of that boundary, you would also have opportunities to add Go Zone to the front or end of that route, depending on where you're coming from and going to. Any questions on this slide? Now let's look at our schedule strategy. We want to achieve better frequency on 3, 6, and 7. We want to preserve current frequency on Connect 7 and Connect 6 peak frequency. We want to align the 3, 6, and 7 smart start times with Go Zone on and off function. And we also want to provide options to curtail that service on 3, 6, and 7 at the end of the day or towards midday. So based on these strategies, we've come up with 3 alternatives. Option 1 looks at all-day frequency on 3, 6, and 7. And from a transit network connectivity standpoint, this provides the best alignment with overall compatibility with our system. Option 2, when we look at that, we could potentially save a little bit of money going with this option. It's a hybrid option of 1. And what this does is it curtails service on 3, 6, and 7 towards the 7 p.m. timeframe. And from 7 p.m. on, you would see a 40-minute frequency. And then option 3, it's again another option to potentially save some money here. This would provide a window of peak times, and then when we start seeing service ridership curtail, we would implement the 40-minute frequency. This could provide some challenges, could be confusing for riders. It's not really consistent with the overall network. So we do see some challenges with option 3, but we want to present all 3 options to the board.
So Austin, I just want to underline the point that we've seen our passengers respond to frequency. That's driven the growth on Connect. Even though some routes haven't grown ridership as much as others, we do see that it can be treated as a network. The consistent start and stop times are required in order to allow that Go Zone function to turn on and off. If you're at 6:50 trying to book a trip inside 3, 6, and 7, you can take Go Zone. If you're at 7:10, you cannot take Go Zone. You have to take the bus. And then the same thing happens at the end of the day. The only reason we have option 3 there is because we have that 40-minute frequency at midday right now on Connect 6. And so we match that to Connect 3. But when you talk about 40-minute frequencies, it makes the travel times a lot long. That's the graph that Austin showed, the table that Austin showed previously, that may cause people to be less likely to take the bus or choose some other mode. So there you see right there. So 20-minute frequency has worked for us over the course of the last year and a half, and 40-minute travel times begin to make 40-minute frequencies make for long trips if you're making connections on a bus network. That's why the options are the way that they are.
Okay, so once we start to factor in costs with each of these options, we wanted to take a quick look at comparative cost of not adding frequency and adding capacity to our existing Go Zone service. When we talk about transitioning the Go Zone buffer to a fixed route, increasing frequency, we need to understand the following considerations. Infrastructure costs for additional bus service and the added bus stops we'll need to implement. What would we do with the Go Zone savings if we redistributed that capacity? If we redistribute that capacity, how would we allocate that capacity, and where that would go? And just for reference, in April 2022, we were provided the additional cost to add vehicle service hours based on high ridership demand on Go Zone. As you can see on the chart on the right, we made a huge investment into that additional capacity. And this is an important factor when we compare investment in specific modes. We need to understand cost per passenger equation in order to make the best decisions for the customer and the agency. As we look forward into how we best allocate resources on all of our modes, we envision an active and dynamic management of supply. This live window into our data sets should allow us to make incremental adjustments based on KPIs, budget, and available service hours. Having these living data sets, we could essentially throttle up and down our service campaigns based on trends, upcoming events, and adjustments in service needs. So this is just kind of an example of where we want to head with our capacity and how we adjust it and how we really on the spot can modify our service. So here's our path forward. We have a few cost formulation exercise we need to finalize with respect to bus frequency option, as well as refining our cost per hour and cost per passenger numbers. We have a communication outreach task with stakeholders to gain feedback on our proposed new bus stop locations. We need to put final touches on our bus stop infrastructure plan and identify those costs. We need to look at a realistic timeline on or realistic outlook on potential ridership capture and confirm capacity savings. And we'll be, of course, working with GoZone on all of these elements, on these alternatives for their capacity. And we'd like to come back to the board next month with more information to consider on the first phase of our ISP. And that is it for that briefing. Any questions?
Questions, comments?
Yeah, I'd like to add a couple questions. You know, we're talking about potential changes. Any type of potential changes that we decide to make to GoZone would take, what, several months before we can even implement it? Because isn't there some type of a outreach we need to do first? Let everybody know, hey, we're going to tweak the system. Isn't that how it would normally work?
I can respond to that. We do need to look at from a federal compliance perspective, what outreach might be required. My initial thought is we're not taking service away. We're changing the service from one mode to the other and actually adding frequency to the bus network. And so from a Title VI perspective, disadvantaged communities, it doesn't trip any alarms in my mind. We do need to have, though, the communication to the public that, hey, this is happening. And if you're taking a GoZone trip, one of those, if somebody's taking that 3, 6, and 7 trip, they need to get a pop-up notice on their phone that says, hey, come October 1 or whenever, you're not going to be able to do this anymore. We're going to be taking you to the bus.
Right.
And then the conversation also with the University of North Texas, which we are going to be having. And then also, as we talk about having open houses in the fall to help with our long-range service plan, we can piggyback on that with some public events about these changes.
Okay. So then as we talked, the other thing we talked about a little bit is if we were to do this and we're going to have some extra capacity on GoZone, you know, I guess my first thought was, okay, we can push some of it down to the south zone, the Highland Village, Louisville zone. But I would be more in favor of kind of feathering it in, maybe gradually, and then see how the KPIs improve. And so that we don't just push all the savings down into one zone and maybe save some of that savings for special events, something else that may come up. So that's my general thoughts on the what to do if we move forward with this and how we could save some of that and use some of that savings.
Just a quick question. I mean, maybe it was covered and I just missed it, but I know that when you were looking at like, forgive me on the language, but the wait time for GoZone in Highland Village, Louisville, and seat occupancy, the two, Louisville, Highland Village were combined.
Mhm.
Is that broken out anywhere where we could see the two cities separately? Because that could drive some of how you make that shift too.
We do have the ability to look at where Louisville and Highland Village are separately. There's a scale issue when we do that because the ridership is much larger on the
Right.
Louisville side. And so we can certainly provide that.
Okay.
So
I know that like, you know, from the Highland Village perspective, the one continuing criticism we get with respect to GoZone reliability and the serviceability and everything is great. Given the constraints, obviously, that a lot of our residents, if they were going to use it, they would want to be able to go into Flower Mound for medical appointments and that kind of thing. And that's not possible right now. But from the members of our city council that do speak critically of the agency and GoZone in particular, They look at it as we're spending this much money, we're giving this much money a year. So that means each one of these Go Zone vans is costing the residents. It's not the correct way to look at it, I realize. But if we could, if we're going to make a shift there, then that negates the argument even further if we can make that, bring that wait time and the seat occupancy time down by increasing availability.
Just to give my feedback, I guess, about how I would like to see any Go Zone capacity that gets freed up, maybe reallocated. I would say that my first priority would be to address seat unavailability and wait times, particularly in Highland Village, Louisville. I definitely think that's a big equity issue since there are not other options in that community. My second priority would be to expand service, Go Zone service to the West Park area, particularly the Airport Road corridor. I had heard for the past few weeks, sort of anecdotally, and then I went out to see it for myself and witnessed it myself, that there's a lot of foot traffic on Airport Road. Lots of people walking, lots of people riding electric scooters. And Airport Road is a very narrow rural roadway. It has bar ditches and there is nowhere for people to walk but right in the middle of the road. And there are a lot of people doing it because that's the employment center. So that's obviously a city infrastructure issue, but I think that Go Zone really has a big role to play in solving that problem too.
That's a great point. And if I could maybe combine that with what Vice Chair Molina talked about with regard to feathering the capacity back. When we make this change, we're not making this change in a static environment. We're going to make this change in the fall when there's going to be a new profile of demand because we just continue to see it going up. So when we come back next month and start talking about costs and offsets, we're going to be able to provide, theoretically, this is the Go Zone capacity that maybe could be offset. But if we do that and the demand is higher, then we're going to risk tripping the threshold, which might cause us to have to look at the KPI difference and all that sort of stuff. So I am leaning towards a more a feather, you call it a feathered sort of approach, throttling back slowly and watching to see how the equilibrium happens. And so heard and understood on all that feedback.
The only other point, and I think you guys have got this, is we can't remove Go Zone service and provide them with an inferior product. Because it's just that hurts both modalities at that point. So I don't want to double down on failure. I want to make sure that we have a very successful opportunity there. And I would hope that the folks who are in love with the modality of a bus make sure they understand that we are working hard to use the data that we have to provide buses where it makes the most sense and get the most ridership as we can to maximize those critters, to hit our sustainability goals and to do all those other things that the city wants.
On a slightly different topic, I wanted to just make a quick comment about we look at the Connect Network schedule, looking at options for that. I realize that we have data where we really could dial it in to the point where we can vary those frequencies based on peak and all of that. But I think from a user perspective, I just considering that probably the best alternative would be one where there's either a consistent frequency all day or the whole day, it's a certain time frame and then it changes after 7 p.m. versus kind of having a morning peak and then it changes in midday and then going back. The multiple changes in a day is going to be very confusing.
You're an engineer, it's just math. I agree. The more decision points, the more variability, the harder it gets. But I think that's definitely an underlying challenge with transit all and so hopefully we'll get some budget options to see the differences. All right, I think that's all we need. Thank you, sir.
I'm up next too.
You up next too? That makes it easy for me, right?
Yeah.
So next is discuss update on the A-Train Enhancement Program.
Thank you again. So we're going to go into a brief review So if you recall, the November 2023 board briefing, we provided the board this beautiful matrix outlining key decisions of the routes that we would potentially take and where funding would be needed along the way. Based on the work of the past 4 months, we have slight modifications to this that we'll share with you to allow us to keep the program moving and make significant incremental progress. Here you will see the progression of the proposed path to date. Excuse me. We are awaiting final formal documentation from DART on the JROF, but that piece of the puzzle is pretty much removed from our program. We have a new element that we're exploring with the additional curve and speed enhancements that we'll focus on in the upcoming slides. Beyond that element, we maintain Corinth Station as a standalone decision at this time, not necessarily impacting our finish line. We maintain the 15-minute frequency element and have the option later to increase service hours. As a reminder, we're still aligning the program to the best estimate we have to date, which is approximately $216 million for that 15-minute headway solution. We will discuss further in the presentation on the proposed strategy of the overall program management piece of a program of this size, as well as funding opportunities that we're looking into. As we look at overall program cost, we challenge ourselves to find creative ways to incrementally move elements of the A-Train program forward, knowing that the overall program funding process could take some time. This idea of incremental speed and curve enhancements was born to allow the train to move faster and decrease the existing 30-minute headways. This concept would provide speed and curve adjustments to 19 existing curves to allow for increased velocity for those specific zones of the rail. The benefits of doing this now is that this scope would be required regardless to get to our end goal of 15-minute frequency. This would also allow for overall runtime improvements, creating a more competitive option for transit adjacent to the I-35 corridor. This increased velocity allows for greater flexibility to recover schedule impacts. And finally, we would propose utilizing existing resources of contracts and contractors to do the speed code changes required and the civil work for the track. The exhibit in front of you to the right shows that where we have current speed restrictions, and those are going to be in the green areas. And then where we're proposing for those speed restrictions to be removed in the blue areas. Another beautiful graph here. This diagram is an illustration showing the entire length of the A train from Trinity Mills all the way to DTC. Towards the bottom, you will find the existing grade crossings as well as station locations in the white boxes. This diagram helps communicate where along the rail line we would see the increase in speed. As you can see, we have larger areas of zones where we could see higher speeds. And the benefit of this is really helps with the physical schedule, but also allows the rider to experience a faster moving, more efficient train operation. So one of our tasks from our November board briefing was also a follow-up conversation with the city of Carrollton on quiet zones. If you recall, quiet zones are areas that require significant roadway and crossing signal infrastructure enhancements to allow for the train to limit audible notifications when it's crossing. A few key takeaways from our collaboration with the city of Carrollton. We've obtained confirmation that the quiet zones have to be maintained throughout this corridor. We obtained feedback that 3 crossings have the potential for us to investigate further as to whether there are opportunities there to actually close or consolidate those crossings and redirect traffic. And those will be happening at Donald, Final X, and Meridian. Also noting there will be official process with the FRA and the city in order to do that work. In addition to the collaboration with Carrollton, we also had a task of collaborating with DG&O. If you recall, this is the short line rail operator that currently operates the rail line that we would be operating on with this extension to downtown Carrollton. The bottom right illustration is the existing operating plan for the Louisville corridor. The orange color designates when DG&O has their freight operation. Yellow is when A train is operating, and green is designated for track maintenance. When we look at DG&O's operation within the Carrollton Extension alignment, we see a potential conflict in the hatched area. This is really from the hours of 5 to 10 p.m. Mondays and Wednesdays at minimum is what they told us. So further discussions will be needed with DGNO and DART on opportunities to where we can make our schedule and their schedule align.
If I can just add here, DGNO is able to operate here over a trackage rights agreement that they have with DART. The trackage rights agreement gives them the windows that you see there to allow the A train to operate on that segment of the track during that time of the day would require an amendment of that trackage rights agreement between DART and DGNO. And so DCTA and DART will remain shoulder to shoulder in the A train enhancement program, even though the JROF project is done. We're talking to DART staff about amending the interlocal agreement that established that partnership to say that DART will still continue to work with DCTA to do these sorts of things. So right now, we don't have that problem with DGNO because they're operating on our current portion of this railroad when we are not operating. But if you head south of here, they're operating in that period that you see hatched out right there. And railroad agreement amendment is the answer to solve it.
So going back to our overall program budget, as we know today, how are we going to pay for this enhancement? Within the FTA, we did some research. There's what is known as the Capital Investment Grant Program. This federal grant program is divided up in 3 main categories: new starts, small starts, and core capacity. As you will see, our program would qualify under the small starts program. And just so you all know, we've been talking with our partners at the FTA region. And from what we understand, the process is pretty straightforward. It includes project development, environmental review, and project submittal documentation. So the application for the grant would contain the following information you see here. The key takeaway here is the application is fairly simple and straightforward, includes a letter of intent, programmatic estimate, and schedule. We do need to continue our talks with the region on how do we get this project into the TIP so the region can help pay for the project development piece as the first step. So the FTA CIG or SIG has a well-defined scoring process, as you can see here. We understand what these pieces are, but we really need some help to develop and compile all of these elements. This requires a lot of effort to pull this information together and submit it. One of the reasons we are looking for support, which we will discuss on the upcoming slides. As you can see, the A-Train program has a broad stakeholder engagement group, including some of the entities you see on this slide. It'd be critical that throughout this program, we have support to maintain and communicate the overall vision, strategy, and execution. We're also looking at professional services support to regarding technical expertise on multiple items, including funding strategies, program delivery, innovative technologies, and cursory review of deliverables. General scope would include these types of services, and just as an FYI, our partners at Trinity Metro recently awarded a program management contract similar to this one for their 2.1 mile extension from Fort Worth TMP down to their near South Side station. We envision this contract be structured in a similar way to that one. And this is how we envision the project delivery team structure for the A-Train Enhancement Program. One key note here is the PMC is the main point of contact for program reporting directly to the VP of Planning and Development. As you will note, stakeholder communication and coordination will be a joint ownership between the PMC and the VP of Planning and Development. Now off into the Corinth update. So we had a productive meeting with the city of Corinth on February 27th, where we saw expressed increased interest in exploring several different potential sites for the rail station, as you see in the exhibit on the blue areas. We also learned of a new property rezoning that was approved for a mixed-use development adjacent to the rail. That's in the yellow area. This development could include both residential and retail and restaurant. One other item of interest is that the city has adopted mixed-use TOD development strategy here, see on the bottom left, into their planning and zoning standards for the city. This aligns with the type of development DCTA would support to entice transit and increase ridership on the A-Train. So timeline, we talk about the path forward and what that looks like. We're beginning to formulate the overall schedule. As you can imagine, there's a lot of pieces you'll see in the background on this slide. But we've divided all these tasks up into 3 major phases as main elements of the program. In the future, you'll be seeing task orders related to support these. As we do those task orders, we'll refine the schedule accordingly. So when we talk about next steps, we still maintain the established task you see on the right of the program that will continue moving those as we develop the details of our schedule. The emerging tasks include, as discussed, the refined scope and cost estimate for the curve and speed enhancements, the request for proposal for program management support, and further exploration and alignment on regional funding to move the program along. And that is our update for A-Train. Happy to answer any questions.
Appreciate the work. Looks great. Let's see if Carrollton can help us out with a few more. Than just the 3. Those 9 are expensive, but
Yeah, they
no,
are.
I appreciate the partnership and that they've started that road. So thank you.
On the question on the improvements to those crossings, you put them quad gates. And I guess is that just a placeholder for now? And that's obviously the most conservative because that's the most expensive. I know that you can do maybe like a median with, 100-foot wide, a median for 100 feet going back that meets the criteria that the FRA has for quiet zones. And that depends on the geometry. Some of that may work, and that could be expensive. And I'm sure that may be something you might consider once you get deeper into it. But I think from a budgeting purpose, you do exactly what I would do. Here's the most expensive option, and if it's less, great.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I could, that note at the bottom, the official process requires a crossing diagnostic. It is really a decision between the FRA and the city to establish the supplemental safety measures that are needed to get to the quiet zone. And so it's a scoring process that says 4 quad gates is worth this many points, raised medians are worth this many points, et cetera, et cetera. And it's through that process that they determine what the right protection is. And so our ability to control that outcome is pretty limited. We budget for the most conservative, and then we wait and see what the diagnostic says. Yes, sir.
There's nothing else. We'll go ahead and move on.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just recognize Austin, he's celebrating his 6-month anniversary with DCTA. And the work that he's shown you today has been developed by him, and he's learning a whole lot of things very quickly in order to be able to deliver those remarks. So I just appreciate Austin being in the building. Thank you, Austin.
Well, I think because it's also Dan's birthday that he owes you something. We'll figure it out.
Fair enough.
That's right. Yeah.
All right, item 6, discuss local and regional updates and legislative issues. What do we got?
Mr. Chairman, we did get a report that the Regional Transit 2.0 initiative contract has been awarded, and there was a kickoff meeting between NCT COG staff and the consultant team with regard to contracting and invoicing and all those sorts of things. We are in contact with NCT COG and expect to be invited to a formal technical kickoff that our team can be involved in. And of course, you have a role in that as well as a member of the RTC. So we keep our eyes and ears open for that conversation.
Yeah, that's starting to move. It'll be interesting to see what rolls out of it. Meetings have been a little gray, so I worry if this is going to be one of those things where we just are presented with solutions, and I'm not sure how much dialogue has really been mapped out at this point. So we'll find out as we continue down that road, but did have some good conversations with the board chairs and directors of the other 2 transit agencies. There was a Transit Coalition of North Texas event that we went to last week, and got to spend some time together, just kind of in a non-technical space to discuss the agencies and how they're working together. And I will tell you that the relationships between the 3 agencies, executive teams, is strong. So we're in a great position to be having this 2.0 conversation. We're in a great position to be dealing with the World Cup and its impacts with transit over the next year and a half, and it's coming quick. That there's going to be a lot of pressure on the whole region to provide transit opportunities. And I think one thing that comes out of the World Cup is that we didn't get the final game. We got 9 games. I think we got more games than anybody else, but we didn't get the final game. And I think you can map that directly to our lack of transit options that the other cities have. And so hopefully that will create some impetus, or at least a data point that we can use when we're going to the state legislature next year to get them to be more creative in how we deal with transit in this state. All right. We did have some informational reports in our packets, safety service and ridership reports. Any questions on those? Got an update on the TOD study. And a couple of others in there. On-call professional architecture, transit member city trips for SPAN. I know there's definitely conversations going on with SPAN. I was at their Meals on Wheels and their 50th anniversary event here last week as well. They kind of are smeared into SPAN quite a bit. So there's some interesting conversations I think that to have there as well. All right, if there's no questions on the informational reports, we'll go ahead and move on. Staff?
No future agenda items or board member requests.
Anything from the board?
Just a few notes on the items of community interest. If we could advance the slide. We recently had the opportunity to celebrate a few 1-year service anniversaries. As we hire all these people, we're going to start celebrating a lot of anniversaries. So we're excited about that. Ms. DeAndrea Harrell on the left-hand side, one of our AP experts. And then, of course, you recognize and know well Mr. Bell and Ms. Evans-Jones. And so, again, one of the great things.
We made it.
That's right.
We made it.
It's not a given. It's not a given, but yes, they made it in Excel. So we're thankful to have them. Next slide. We also recently had the opportunity to celebrate the demolition of the buildings at the Burns property. A credit to Austin, who had the vision to say, hey, let's make a big deal out of this thing. And so he said, we threw a little party, and the whole team got together, and we counted down while the excavator tore into the building. And now there's thanks to Mr. Joe Warren and Ms. Cheryl Evans-Jones, there's a clearly graded site ready for TOD. So we're excited about that. We also recently got to celebrate a week-long Transit Employee Appreciation Day, several events here at headquarters, at the bus ops building in Denton, where we handed out gifts, we did meals, and a good time. We appreciate our operators, our staff, what they do on a daily basis is what makes the people move. And so they're our front line to the public, and we appreciate it. We also, as a credit to Mr. Steve Swanberg, our Director of Safety, he's initiated a program to recognize people with safety awards. And we recently recognized our fleet manager, who took the opportunity to develop a brine making machine and a brine distribution machine in our bus ops area so that we could put salt water down in freezes to prevent freezing and ensure safe path of travel. So retrofitted a high pressure power washer trailer with a couple $100 of parts from Home Depot, hand mixed 200 gallons of brine solution. Next year we'll have a machine for that too, and distributed all across the bus ops yard and our DDTC. And so we recognized him just a few weeks ago. And so we thank Bobby Yard, who's made a tremendous impact since just coming on board at DCTA in the last couple of months. Last thing I'd just like to share with the group and for the good of the public who might be listening, we are halfway through the fiscal year. We started out with an aggressive work plan, and just a recap and kind of a highlight of all the things that are happening inside the organization. Having hired 14 new staff since October 1, have launched and trained on a new dispatching platform for our paratransit service. We launched and have begun refining the Collin County Rides program. We completed a day-and-a-half strategic workshop and developed a 5-year work plan and strategic goals through 2035. We're maintaining KPIs on a ridership growth that's on a record pace, intermediate service plan, A-Train enhancement program, Corinth Station, new member policy, buying buses, customer service leader coming into the building to begin revamping the customer service organization, Old Town Louisville, transit oriented development will be briefed here soon, and a finance ERP that is going to kick off any day now. So
Show the schedule. It is scary.
yeah. So we appreciate the board's support to resource us in all the ways that allow us to do that work. And it's a pleasure to serve the men and women of Denton County and our member cities. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Board, do we have any items of community interest? Well, I've got one. So the Dallas Observer yesterday released an article that basically that the headline was, "See the eclipse, don't go to Denton." The second half of that article was, "Go to Louisville." So if you guys take that under consideration, and by the way, I told Mayor Hudspeth I had nothing to do with the article. But if those of you in the northern part of the county decide you want to come south, I can't think of a better way than to hop on the A train so you can come south to see the total eclipse. We've got a couple of events going on in Louisville on April 8th as well during that noontime to 2 p.m. There's one event at Leela and there's one event at Wayne Ferguson Plaza, which is right down the street from the Old Town DCTA stop. So come on, but come by train because we all know that it gets really congested for these kinds of events and the train would be the best way to go. So with that, are we good? Any other comments? There is no further action to be taken on this agenda. We are adjourned. 12:57.